It seems like everyone's forgotten about Amazon and is instead trying to make money with either branded dropshipping or TikTok shop or whatever else is the new e-commerce business model that's trending. And for people like me, this is the best thing that's happened in years. Competition on Amazon has dropped, demand continues to grow, and now with AI stacked on top, it's easier than ever to build an e-commerce business that can make you serious money while being semi-passive to operate once you actually set everything up. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how I'm using AI to make over $100,000 per month thanks to Amazon. If you're new here, my name is Michael Elliott, and over the last few years, I've built multiple e-commerce brands generating over $5 million on Amazon. And in this video, I'm gonna show you exactly how AI removes 80% of the guesswork so that you can find profitable products faster and create optimized listings easier and cheaper than ever before. When I first started, everything took forever. Product research, keyword digging, validation, analyzing top sellers, writing listings. Nothing was really streamlined. And so I spent weeks trying to find a single product. And the worst part is when I launched my first two products, I still failed. I lost around $6,000 on the first one and a couple thousand more on the second. And not because Amazon was too competitive, but because the process was slow, manual, and easy to mess up when you didn't know what actually mattered. But today, AI compresses months of trial and error into minutes, market analysis, review breakdowns, competitor weaknesses, search trends. Things that used to take me entire weekends now take seconds. It's faster, cheaper, and far more accurate than guessing. And the craziest part of it is how few sellers are actually using it properly. Most people still operate like it's 2018, manually checking everything, making emotional-based decisions, doing things the hard way for no reason. What's interesting is that the shift didn't happen because Amazon changed, it happened because people changed. Over the last few years, you've had a mass exodus of beginners chasing whatever looks like the fastest way to make money. TikTok shop, crypto, branded dropshipping, wholesale arbitrage. But like I've said before, most people don't succeed with those models because they're unpredictable, margins are thin, and completely dependent on hype cycles. Amazon quietly became easier for the same reason certain real estate markets boom when investors leave after a hype cycle. Fewer people competing for the same amount of demand. The opportunity becomes clear once the noise dies down. A good example is YouTube. Years ago, everyone said it was too late. Then TikTok blew up, creators jumped ship, and suddenly the creators who stayed on YouTube saw their growth skyrocket because attention shifted again. And that's exactly what's happening on Amazon right now. Amazon demand hasn't dipped, not even during the biggest economic shifts we've seen in the last decade. Its infrastructure, it's predictable, it's stable, and Amazon still moves hundreds of billions per year with a customer base that buys in any economy. Irony is that beginners don't realize this. They leave when the competition is actually low and demand is at its highest. If this were any other industry, real estate, stocks, even crypto, people would be sprinting toward the opportunity. But because Amazon isn't loud, they don't see it. And that's great for the people who do. Back then, if you wanted to validate a product, you had to manually read hundreds of competitor reviews, compare dozens of listings, cross-check every number in Zombase or Helium-10, and hope you didn't overlook something. Even understanding trends meant sifting through months of BSR charts and search volume history. Now I can feed AI a niche, and within seconds it tells me demand patterns, competitor weaknesses, what customers complain about, what differentiator would actually matter, what keyword drives the revenue, whether the market is trending up, flat, or seasonal. That entire cycle, which beginners usually spend 30 to 60 days trying to learn, can be done in one sitting. Tools used to be just data providers. Now AI is a strategist that connects the dots for you. One of the biggest mindset shifts in my journey was learning that my feelings didn't matter, the data did. I used to choose products because I liked them. I used to panic when sales dipped. I used to think a slow week meant that the product was dead. But as I grew, I learned that the data tells the truth, not your emotions. AI gives beginners the discipline that took me years to develop. It eliminates the I think and replaces it with the here's what the numbers say. Instead of guessing what customers want, AI literally summarizes what thousands of customers are already complaining about. Instead of fearing competition, it shows exactly which listings are vulnerable. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, it simplifies the next logical step. AI doesn't make you smarter, it removes the ways you sabotage yourself. And that's really the turning point. Once AI removes the guesswork, you start to see how different the business becomes when you're actually operating with clarity. But funny enough, this is exactly where most sellers fall behind because they haven't realized how much the game has changed. They're still treating AI like a small optional tool instead of the advantage it really is, because they think AI is a shortcut when it's really an amplifier. Most people treat it like a writing tool instead of a decision-making tool. They still make choices based on emotion, fear, or whatever some guru told them on YouTube. Meanwhile, AI users are launching more confidently, validating more accurately, and building products people actually want. It's the same way early social media advertisers underestimated Facebook ads. The people who learned how to use the new tool first got insane results while everyone else thought it was overhyped. Eventually, everyone else caught on, but the early adopters made the most money. So we're in the exact same window right now for AI on Amazon. Now that you understand how much AI speeds up this business, the next thing you naturally start to wonder is how that translates into actually choosing a product. Because for most people, this is where everything slows down. They go in circles, second guess themselves, and end up spending weeks trying to pick a direction. But when you combine AI with the right data tools, this becomes one of the fastest and most predictable parts of the process. So instead of opening Amazon and scrolling aimlessly, which is exactly what I did early on, I start with AI. I'll give ChatGPT a broad market and it breaks the entire space down for me. Not random product suggestions, but the actual problems customers are trying to solve, the pockets inside of the niche that are underserved, and what buyers consistently gravitate toward. Starting with that kind of clarity makes everything else downstream smoother because you're no longer brainstorming in the dark. Once AI helps me see where the demand and the problems are, that's when I bring everything into Zombase. It gives me the real numbers behind the ideas, how strong the demand is, how tough the competition actually is, and whether the niche is stable enough to be worth pursuing. And the nice thing is, the data from Zombase feeds right back into AI. I can take those insights, drop them into ChatGPT, and instantly get a breakdown of how the market behaves, what patterns matter, and which ideas actually make sense. That back and forth gives you a clear direction instead of choosing whatever looks good. Once the direction is set and the data checks out, that's when the real opportunities start showing up. Most sellers look at the obvious products, things sitting at the top of categories or trending on social media. But the most profitable opportunities are usually hidden inside broader niches. Zombase makes those easy to spot because it highlights categories where the demand is solid, but the top sellers are weak. Bad photos, low reviews, outdated branding, and AI helps make sense of why those weaknesses matter. It connects the dots between what customers want and what competitors aren't delivering. That insight naturally flows into the next step, making sure you're not walking into a seasonal trap. One thing that ruins beginners more than anything is choosing a product that only looks good for a moment. You see great numbers for 1 month, you get excited, and then the second you launch, the market crashes. This is why I always check trend stability. Zombase shows whether demand is steady or spiking, and then I have AI translate that into something actually useful. Is this niche growing, flattening? Is it a short-lived trend? AI turns a messy chart into a clear explanation. And once you know you're in a stable niche, the next step is figuring out where buyers are getting frustrated. This is where AI feels almost unfair. I used to manually read hundreds of reviews trying to understand what customers hated about a product, and it took forever. Now I export the reviews, drop them into ChatGPT, and it gives me everything I need. The most common complaints, the issues competitors keep ignoring, and the improvements customers are basically begging for. Once you see that clearly, you start to understand which ideas have potential and which ones are dead ends. At this point, you've gone from a broad idea to a niche, to understanding competitor weaknesses, to knowing exactly what customers want changed. And the entire workflow is rooted in data rather than emotion. That's what reduces risk. Early on, I chose products because I personally liked them. Now every decision runs through the same filter. AI gives me direction, Zombase gives me the numbers, and AI interprets those numbers, so I'm never guessing. Once all of that aligns, the only thing left is figuring out how to make the product better. By the time you've gone through this process, you're not just picking a product, you're seeing exactly where the opportunity is inside that product. You know what customers are frustrated with, what competitors consistently get wrong, and what gap actually needs filling. And that's a perfect setup for the next step, because the entire goal is to build a version that solves the problems everyone is ignoring. That's where differentiation begins. After you lock in a product worth pursuing, the next step is figuring out how to create a version that people genuinely prefer. And this is where most beginners fall off, not because differentiation is hard, but because they don't know how to approach it in a way that's grounded in real customer needs. AI changes that completely by removing the guesswork and turning customer feedback into a clear roadmap. The starting point is always the customer experience. I take the reviews and questions from the top sellers, drop them into ChatGPT, and let it break everything down. What comes back isn't random, it's the deeper frustrations that repeat across thousands of buyers. Sometimes it's durability, sometimes it's sizing, sometimes it's packaging or usability. And seeing all of that organized in one place gives you immediate clarity on what people wish existed, and that naturally shapes the direction of your product. But not every complaint should dictate your design. Some issues barely affect buying decisions, while others completely determine whether a customer leaves a 5-star or 1-star review. I wanna see which weaknesses consistently show up in markets where the top sellers still perform well, and which ones create openings where a better design could grab market share. The combination of feedback plus data filters out the noise and points you towards improvements that actually change outcomes. Once the meaningful problems are clear, I go back to ChatGPT and ask it to brainstorm solutions, but with context. I'll tell it the product's limitations, the price point I'm aiming for, and the type of customer that I'm serving. That's when the ideas get interesting. Small design tweaks, usability improvements, packaging adjustments, material changes, things that actually solve the underlying issue instead of adding gimmicks. And because these ideas are tied to the customer pain points, you already validated they're grounded in demand, not wishful thinking. This is also where discipline matters, because some upgrades look amazing on paper, but destroy your margins in real life. So I narrow every improvement down using one question. Would a customer notice and care about this right away? If the answer is no, it gets cut immediately. If the answer is yes, I'll run it back through Zonbase to see how similar features have performed historically. And the goal isn't to build a perfect product, it's to build the product customers expected to receive in the first place. Now, before committing to a design, I take the final improvement concept and let ChatGPT stress test it. I'll ask, based on all the customer complaints and market behavior we analyzed, does this solve the core frustrations in a meaningful way? AI will tell you instantly whether you're addressing real demand or just changing things for the sake of being different. When both the customer insights and the market data line up, you know the differentiation isn't cosmetic, it actually gives you an advantage. By this point, you have something most sellers never reach, a product idea that directly solves the problems the market has been shouting about for years. So I pull everything into a simple concept brief, the customer frustrations, the improvement strategy, the reasoning behind each change, and any examples of competitors failing to meet expectations. This document becomes the blueprint I can send to suppliers, and it removes 90% of the back and forth. They know exactly what I want and why I'm asking for it, and that speeds up sampling, pricing, and manufacturing dramatically. And that leads straight into the next chapter, finding suppliers who can actually execute on the vision without cutting corners or wasting time. With your product concept defined, the next challenge is getting it manufactured correctly. It can sound intimidating. You're dealing with factories, negotiating pricing, and making sure the product you imagine actually shows up with the way you pictured it. But the truth is, this part becomes 10 times easier once you know what to look for and how to communicate clearly from the start. I always begin by casting a wide net, but with intention. Instead of messaging every factory that pops up, look for suppliers who already manufacture similar products and have a track record of doing it well. Once I reach out, I'm not just looking at who responds fastest, I'm looking at how they respond. Some suppliers immediately give you a copy-paste pitch. Others ask smart questions about your design, the improvements you want, or your intended market. Those thoughtful replies are the first signal that a factory actually understands what you're trying to build. And once those conversations start, the next challenge becomes communicating what you want without anything getting lost. Clear communication is everything here. If your explanation is vague, the factory is forced to guess, and guessing always leads to bad samples. So I take the differentiation work we did earlier and turn it into a simple product brief. What the product should solve, what improvements matter most, and why those changes are important. If I ever want to phrase something in a cleaner, more direct way, I'll run my message through ChatGPT. It helps me remove any wording that could confuse the supplier. Once the expectations are clear, the question becomes how to separate the suppliers who understand your vision from the ones who just want the order. This is where paying attention to the details matters. Every supplier will tell you they can do anything. So instead of listening to promises, pay attention to the depth of their answers. Do they acknowledge the complexity of your improvement? Do they suggest alternatives? Are they transparent about limitations? When a factory gives thoughtful, specific responses, it's a good sign they won't cut corners later. And once you can tell who's serious and who's bluffing, you're finally in a position to talk pricing in a way that doesn't make you look inexperienced. Good negotiation is really just good framing. When suppliers see that you understand the materials, the design changes, the order quantities, and the reasoning behind your decisions, the entire conversation shifts. Instead of asking for discounts, I ask for options, different materials, packaging, alternatives, or order quantities that reduce costs without lowering quality. If I'm unsure how to phrase something so it sounds strong and confident, I'll let AI help me rewrite it before sending it off. And once pricing is squared away, the next step, samples, becomes the moment where everything starts to feel real. Samples are where you find out who actually understood your vision. I always order from multiple suppliers because the best communicator isn't always the one who produces the best sample. When the samples arrive, I evaluate them based on the improvements we identified earlier, not just how they look, but whether they solve the real problems customers complained about. If a sample misses the mark, I document the issues clearly, send photos or videos, and have a conversation about the fix. Sometimes I'll even use AI to help me phrase the feedback so nothing gets misinterpreted. And once a supplier proves they can deliver the quality that you are looking for, you can finally move into refining the final version. This last step is where clarity matters more than ever. I walk through every improvement one by one with the supplier, the materials, the dimensions, the packaging, the finish, everything. I get confirmations in writing, not assumptions. When something feels rushed or vague, I slow the process down. By the time the final design is approved, both sides know exactly what's being produced and why. And that leads naturally into the next stage, because once the product is ready, the question becomes how to launch it in a way that actually gets traction. Once your final product is locked in with the supplier, the focus shifts from creating something great to actually getting it in front of buyers. This is the stage most people overcomplicate. They panic, they overspend, or they assume they need some crazy secret launch strategy. But the truth is, launching on Amazon today is much simpler than people think, especially when you use AI to cut through the noise and PPC to give the algorithm the signals that it needs. So everything starts with your listing. Before you even touch PPC or think about ranking, your product page needs to communicate exactly what you want Amazon to understand about your product. This is where AI saves you hours. I'll take the keywords that I get from Zombase and data I pulled earlier, drop them into ChatGPT, and have it craft a clean SEO structured listing draft. Not final copy, just a starting point. Then I tweak the parts that matter, the first line of the title, the first sentence of the bullet points, and the messaging that ties directly back to the differentiation we worked on earlier. Once the listing is clear and customer focused, your PPC actually has something to work with. And that naturally leads into how I structure the early ads. A lot of beginners launch with 20 to 30 campaigns because they think more equals better. That's how you blow your money. Start with a simple setup. One auto campaign and a few manual campaigns targeting the most relevant keywords, the ones directly tied to the problem your product solves. The goal isn't to become profitable on day one. The goal is to help Amazon understand your product quickly so you can rank where people are actually searching. AI helps here too. I'll paste my keyword list into ChatGPT and ask it to group them by intent. It organizes everything for me, so I'm only bidding on the terms that actually matter. Once your ads are live, the next piece is understanding how to read them without freaking out when the numbers bounce around. Every launch looks a little chaotic in the beginning, right? Your ACoS jumps around, your click-through rate fluctuates, and you're trying to figure out whether the data is good or bad. Here's what I focus on. Are people clicking? Are people buying at least somewhat consistently? Is Amazon starting to show me on the keywords I targeted? If the answer is yes, I keep going. AI helps me read this more clearly. I'll paste a few days of PPC data into GPT and ask it for patterns. Sometimes the insight it pulls are things I wouldn't have noticed on my own. And once the early numbers stabilize, that's when the real ranking starts happening. Ranking is really just a cycle. Customers search, they click, they buy. If your listing is clear, your photos look premium, and your product solves a real problem, your PPC helps generate those early clicks and sales. As long as Amazon sees that happening consistently, it starts moving you up organically. I'm not trying to outspend competitors, I'm trying to signal relevance. And when AI helps refine the listing and the ads keep feeding the algorithm, those signals get stronger week after week. Pretty soon, you're not relying only on PPC anymore, you're showing up naturally where your customers are looking. Momentum isn't built by doing more, it's built by staying consistent. Once I see that the listing is converting and PPC is stabilizing, I look at customer behavior. Are reviews coming in? Are customers mentioning the improvements we implemented? Are any complaints popping up? I'll feed this feedback into GBT to see if there's anything I should address early, whether it's an instruction insert, a packaging fix, or something I need to clarify in the listing. That's how you avoid small problems turning into bigger ones, and how you turn early traction into long-term stability. Now, once your ranking locks in and sales start coming in consistently, your entire strategy shifts. You go from trying to push the product forward to simply maintaining visibility and optimizing the listing. Your ad spend becomes more efficient, your reviews start reinforcing your differentiation, and Amazon begins rewarding you simply because you built something customers actually wanted in the first place. That's the turning point where the business feels less like a constant grind and more like something stable. And that's exactly what everything in the next chapter sets you up for. After your product starts ranking and sales stabilize, the business enters a different phase entirely. One where your biggest advantage comes from systems, not hustle. And this shift is what actually allows you to scale. When the business becomes predictable, the first thing I focus on is staying dialed in on the numbers that tell me whether everything is functioning the way it should. I'm not refreshing Amazon 20 times a day. I'm looking at the core signals: sales, consistency, conversion rate, ad performance, and inventory levels. Those 4 things tell you almost everything you need to know. If something looks off, I'll paste a snapshot of the numbers into GBT to help me spot patterns or unexpected changes. Not to replace decision making, just to make the trends easier to see. And the more consistent those numbers look, the easier it becomes to step back from the daily grind. Once the business becomes stable, the real question becomes, what actually requires me? Early on, I handled everything: customer messages, supplier communication, admin tasks, logistics, follow-ups, all of it. But at a certain point, you realize most of those tasks only require someone, not you. So I started handing things off. Customer support, my team handles that now. Admin and day-to-day logistics, my team handles that too. Amazon takes care of returns and fulfillment, but there's a lot outside of Amazon's scope that you don't need to be dealing with personally. And the more of those tasks you delegate, the clearer your head becomes, and that naturally leads into the next step: building a small but reliable team. Most people think that scaling means hiring 5 different specialists. It doesn't. You don't need a giant team to run a high revenue Amazon brand. One solid VA who's trained properly can take a huge amount off your plate. Customer messages, tracking down small issues, updating spreadsheets, checking shipments, handling little fires that used to interrupt your day. It's not about building a big operation, it's about removing the constant interruptions so you can focus on the decisions that actually move the business forward. And once that space opens up, the next challenge becomes keeping everything organized as the business grows. Chaos happens when you scale faster than you organize. The way I avoid that is by keeping simple rhythms: a quick daily check on the numbers, a weekly update with the people helping me, a monthly deep dive into margins and ad spend. If anything looks off, I address it right away. Sometimes I'll copy a month of data into ChatGPT and have it summarize key changes just so I can process everything faster. When you stay ahead of small issues, they never turn into big ones. And the business grows without becoming overwhelming. And once you find that rhythm, your role starts to change in a really good way. The surprising part about scaling is how normal it feels once you're there. Most people imagine chaos, constant stress, constant decisions, but it's actually the opposite. When your systems are clean and your team is handling the repetitive work, your job becomes making better decisions with less noise. You're thinking about new products, strengthening supplier relationships, improving margins, not whether a customer got the wrong tracking number. And that clarity is what sets the stage for the final evolution: building something that doesn't just scale, but actually becomes semi-passive. Semi-passive doesn't mean disappearing. It means you've removed yourself from everything that doesn't require your judgment or creativity. The team handles the day-to-day, Amazon handles the fulfillment. Your job becomes oversight, improvement, and long-term direction. At that point, the business isn't chaotic, it isn't overwhelming, it feels steady, predictable. And for the first time, you can step back, spend time with family, travel, or work on the next opportunity, knowing the machine keeps running. And honestly, that's the best part. Once your systems are clean and your team knows what they're doing, the business just becomes a lot easier to live with. It stops taking over your life. If you want to see this entire system in action: product research, validation, supplier outreach, listings, PPC, everything, I put together a free 4-hour Amazon course on my YouTube channel. It's the most detailed breakdown I've ever made. And if you actually apply it, you'll be months ahead of the average beginner.